I grew up in a house where my sister got everything: the love, the money, the future. I was the quiet one, the backup plan. Then one day, everything collapsed. My parents lost it all, and the daughter they trusted most vanished. Silence. No calls. No help. Just me. I walked in and saved them. After years of being invisible, I became the only one left standing. So tell me, would you stay or walk away? I grew up learning how to stay quiet because in my house silence meant survival. While my sister filled every room with laughter, praise, and attention, I learned to disappear in plain sight. Be patient, my mom would say. Your time will come. It never did. Instead, I watched birthdays where her gifts covered the table while mine fit in one small box. Each moment seemed small, but they stacked into something heavier, something harder to ignore. So I adapted. I worked harder, stayed longer, expected less. That was how I survived. Until the day survival wasn't enough anymore. The call came out of nowhere, a stranger's voice asking if I was Scarlett. Then came the words that stopped everything: your parents are about to lose the house. I froze, trying to understand how it got that bad. I asked about my sister. Silence again. We couldn't reach her. That was the moment something shifted. All those years of being second suddenly meant I was first in line to deal with the damage. And standing there, phone in my hand, I realized something sharper than anger. They had given her everything, but when everything broke, it was my name they called. So tell me, would you answer that call? Or would you let it ring, knowing the same people who overlooked you now needed you to save them from the consequences of their own choices? Would you stay or walk away? I didn't answer right away. My thumb hovered over the screen, my chest tightening as memories rushed back in, sharper than before. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about a house. It was about years of being overlooked, quietly erased while standing right there. My sister never had to wonder if she was loved. I did. She just needs more support, my dad used to say whenever I asked for anything. More support? Or just more favoritism dressed up as concern? I remember the day they paid for her dream college without hesitation. When I asked about mine, my mom sighed, avoiding my eyes. You're stronger, Scarlett. You'll figure it out. And I did. Every job, every late night, every sacrifice, I built my life alone while she lived the one they funded. That difference didn't happen by accident. It was a choice. Their choice. And now, standing on the other side of that choice, I could finally see the full picture. The same pattern, just with higher stakes. They invested everything in her future and ignored the risk. No backup plan. No safety net. Just blind faith. And now that faith had collapsed. Still, part of me hesitated. Not because I didn't understand what they had done, but because I did. Helping them meant reopening doors I had worked so hard to close. You don't owe them anything, a voice in my head whispered. But another voice pushed back, quieter, steadier. Then who are you if you walk away? I exhaled slowly, the weight of that question settling in. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. About the kind of person I had become despite everything. And maybe that's where my story really begins, not with what they did, but with who I became because of it. I wasn't loud. I wasn't demanding. I learned early that asking for too much only made things worse. So I adjusted. I listened more than I spoke. I noticed everything, every glance, every pause, every moment when I almost mattered but didn't. You're so easy, Scarlett, my mom would say with a relieved smile. Easy. That word followed me everywhere. Easy meant I didn't need help. Easy meant I wouldn't complain. Easy meant I could be forgotten without consequences. At least, that's what they believed. But being easy didn't mean I didn't feel it. I felt everything. The way conversations shifted when I entered the room. The way decisions were made before I was even asked. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, consistent, undeniable. And over time, I stopped expecting anything different. I built routines around independence, packed my own lunches, handled my own problems, kept my victories quiet. No one was waiting to celebrate them anyway. Still, I kept going. Because somewhere deep down, I told myself this was strength. This was resilience. Until one small moment made me question all of it. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a report I was proud of. "Mom, I got the highest score," I started. She didn't even look up. "That's nice, honey. Can you help your sister with her application?" I stood there, the paper shaking slightly in my hand. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I wasn't overlooked by accident. I was overlooked by design. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. Being easy was never a compliment. It was a role I was assigned so everything else could run smoothly without me. So I leaned into it, not out of acceptance, but because resisting it felt pointless. I became the one who fixed things before anyone noticed they were broken. The one who stayed quiet during arguments, then cleaned up the emotional aftermath no one else wanted to face. "Scarlett will handle it," my dad would say, already walking away. And I did. Not because I wanted to, but because no one else would. Still, something inside me kept shifting. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. I started paying attention to patterns instead of moments. Every time my sister needed something, it was urgent, immediate, important. Every time I needed something, it was optional, delayed, dismissed. That difference shaped everything, even the way I saw myself. I stopped asking for help, not because I didn't need it, but because I already knew the answer. And yet, I didn't fall apart. I adapted. I learned skills no one taught me. Managed responsibilities no one tracked. Built strength no one acknowledged. Until one small moment reframed it all. I remember my sister panicking over a missed deadline, voices raised, tension filling the room. "I can't fix this," she said. My parents rushed to her side. I stepped in, quietly reviewing her work, solving the issue in minutes. The room settled. No one thanked me. No one even noticed. But this time I did. Because for the first time, it wasn't invisible to me anymore. I wasn't just the overlooked child. I was the one holding everything together. And once I understood my place, it became impossible not to see hers. Amanda didn't just receive more. She was built to expect it. From the outside, she looked perfect. Confident, charming, effortlessly admired. People loved her within minutes. "She has something special," my mom would say, watching her like she was already destined for something bigger. And maybe she was, but not in the way they imagined. Because behind that shine, there was a pattern no one wanted to question. Amanda never learned to wait. If she wanted something, she asked. If she didn't get it, she pushed. "Why does she get to decide?" she once snapped when I was given a small choice. The room went quiet. Then my dad stepped in, not to correct her, but to adjust the situation. To make her comfortable again. That was how it always worked. Her discomfort became everyone's problem. Her desires became priorities. Over time, it shaped her. Not cruel in an obvious way, not openly selfish, but certain. Certain that things would bend for her. And they did. Opportunities, money, attention, everything aligned around her path. Meanwhile, I learned to step aside before being asked. But the more I watched, the more something didn't add up. Because Amanda wasn't stronger. She wasn't more capable. She was just more protected. Every failure softened before it reached her. Every consequence absorbed by someone else. Until one question started forming, quiet but persistent. What happens when no one is left to catch her? I didn't have the answer yet. But deep down, I knew one thing. Her world only worked because someone else was holding it together. And the more I watched her world being protected, the more I started to understand the people who built it. My parents never saw themselves as unfair. In their eyes, they were simply doing what was necessary. "She needs a little more help right now," my mom would say, already moving resources in Amanda's direction. It always sounded temporary. It never was. At first, I thought it was about personality, Amanda being louder, me being quieter. But over time, the pattern became too precise to ignore. Every decision leaned the same way. Every compromise came from me. "You're more responsible," my dad told me once, almost proudly. And somehow, that became the reason I received less. Responsibility didn't earn support. It replaced it. They weren't cruel. That's what made it harder to question. They still asked about my day, still smiled, still believed they loved us equally. But love isn't just what you feel, it's what you choose to give. And their choices told a different story. Subtle at first, then impossible to miss. They didn't mean to overlook me. They just kept choosing her. Again and again, until it stopped feeling like a mistake and started looking like a system. A system where Amanda was protected, and I was prepared. Prepared for struggle, for independence, for silence. And standing there, watching it all come together, I realized something that changed everything. They didn't raise two daughters the same way. They raised one to be taken care of, and one to take care of everything. And once I understood that system, I started seeing all the moments that built it, small, quiet, but impossible to forget. It was never one big event. It was the accumulation. A dress I loved, hanging in the store window. "Let Amanda try it first," my mom said. She walked out wearing it. I didn't ask again. A school trip I wanted to join. "We can't afford both," my dad explained, already filling out her form. Mine stayed blank. Each time, the decision came quickly, almost automatically, like there was never a real choice to begin with. I told myself it was fine. I always did. But the body remembers what the mind tries to dismiss. I remember standing at the dinner table, trying to join a conversation about my own achievement. "I got selected for," I started. "That's great," my mom cut in gently, then turned back to Amanda. "So, tell us more about your plans." The moment slipped away. No one noticed. Except me. That was the pattern, being acknowledged just enough to move on, never enough to matter. And the more it happened, the more I adjusted. I spoke less. Asked less. Expected less. It made everything easier for them. But something inside me kept track, even when I pretended not to. Not anger. Not yet. Just a quiet awareness growing sharper over time. Until one day, it stopped feeling like coincidence altogether. It felt intentional. Like every overlooked moment was part of a larger design I had never agreed to, but had been living inside my entire life. And after a while, being overlooked turned into something else, being the one who gave things up before anyone had to ask. At first, it felt like choice. Like control. "It's okay, she can have it," I would say, stepping back before the decision was even made. My parents would nod relieved. Amanda wouldn't hesitate. And just like that, another piece of me quietly disappeared. It happened with small things, then bigger ones. Time. Opportunities. Even space in the house felt like it belonged to her first. I learned to calculate every situation before speaking. If I wanted something, I asked myself one question: is it worth the tension it might create? Most of the time, the answer was no. So I stayed silent. Again and again. Until silence became instinct. I remember one afternoon, sitting with an acceptance letter in my hand, my heart racing with something close to hope. This could change everything, I thought. But before I could even bring it up, my sister walked in, upset about her own situation. The room shifted instantly. Voices raised, attention redirected. I folded the letter slowly, feeling that familiar pressure in my chest. "We need to focus on her right now," my mom said without looking at me. Of course. We always did. I slipped the envelope into my bag, the edges pressing against my fingers like a reminder. Not of what I lost, but of what I gave up without a fight. And in that moment, something heavier settled in. It wasn't just that I sacrificed. It was that I had been trained to believe I should. And maybe that was the moment something inside me stopped aligning with everything I had been taught to accept. It wasn't loud. It didn't explode into anger or confrontation. It was quieter than that, more dangerous. A small crack, almost invisible, forming beneath years of practiced silence. I still did what I was expected to do. I still stepped back when Amanda stepped forward. But something had changed in the way I saw it. I remember looking at my reflection that night, the acceptance letter still hidden in my bag. "Why didn't you say anything?" I whispered to myself. No answer came. Just the weight of that question lingering longer than it should. For the first time, it didn't feel like strength to stay silent. It felt like loss. Not of opportunity, but of myself. And once that thought appeared, it didn't leave. It followed me into every decision, every moment where I was about to give something up again. "Do you even want this?" A voice inside me asked, sharper now. I hesitated. That hesitation was new, unfamiliar, but real. And in that pause, I realized something that shifted everything just slightly off balance. I hadn't been choosing to sacrifice. I had been conditioned to disappear. And now that I could see it, I couldn't go back to not knowing. And once that awareness settled in, the next decision didn't feel random anymore. It felt inevitable. College was approaching, and for the first time, everything was laid out in the open. Applications, tuition costs, future plans. It should have been a shared conversation. It wasn't. I remember sitting at the table, papers spread out, my acceptance letter finally placed where it could be seen. My hands were steady, but my chest wasn't. "We need to talk about finances," my dad began, his tone already carrying the weight of a conclusion. I nodded slowly, waiting. Then came the numbers. The limitations. The careful explanations that sounded reasonable until they weren't. "We can't support both of you," my mom said, softer, almost apologetic. Silence followed, thick and unmoving. I glanced at Amanda. She didn't look surprised. That was the first signal. Then my dad continued, "Her program is more competitive. It makes more sense to invest there." Invest. The word landed harder than expected. Not support. Not help. Invest. Like this was a calculation, and I already knew the result. I opened my mouth, just slightly. For a second, I thought about speaking, about asking why my effort, my acceptance, my future didn't carry the same weight. But the moment passed quickly. It always did. "I understand," I said instead, the words coming out smoother than they should have. Relief flickered across their faces. Decision confirmed. And, just like that, it was done. No argument. No reconsideration. Only later did the realization fully settle in, not that they couldn't choose both, but that they never planned to. And once that decision was made, everything after it moved faster than I expected, like my life had already been rerouted without me fully catching up. There was no dramatic goodbye, no moment where anyone acknowledged what I was losing. Just quiet logistics. Forms to fill out alone. Deadlines I had to track myself. "You'll manage," my mom said as she handed me a stack of papers, already turning back to Amanda's preparations. Of course I would. I always did. But this time, it felt different. This wasn't about stepping aside anymore. This was about being left behind. I remember packing my things for a campus I hadn't even dreamed of attending, folding clothes into a suitcase that felt heavier than it should. Not because of what I was bringing, but because of what I wasn't. No financial safety net. No emotional support waiting on the other side. Just me. Again. Meanwhile, Amanda's departure looked nothing like mine. New luggage. Celebratory dinners. Photos in front of the house. "We're so proud of you," my parents said, voices warm, steady. I stood just outside the frame, watching it happen like I didn't belong in the picture. That was the moment it hit hardest. Not the decision itself, but how easily everyone moved on from it. As if my path required less attention, less care, less everything. I told myself it didn't matter. I would build something anyway. But deep down, something sharper settled in. This wasn't just independence. It was exclusion. And for the first time, I didn't just feel overlooked. I felt deliberately removed from a future that was never meant to include me. And even after I walked away, I didn't let myself feel it, not fully. It was easier to stay focused on survival than to sit with what had actually happened. Classes, work, bills, they filled every gap where emotion could have slipped in. Just keep going, I told myself whenever something tightened in my chest. So I did. I kept moving, kept achieving, kept proving, though no one was really watching. From the outside, it looked like strength. Inside, it was something else entirely. Because every time I succeeded, there was a quiet question underneath it. Would it have mattered back there? Would they have noticed if I had stayed? I pushed those thoughts down quickly. They didn't help. They didn't change anything. Still, certain moments broke through no matter how hard I tried to contain them. A late night, staring at my phone, wondering if anyone would call first. They didn't. A small one I wanted to share, then stopping mid-message, knowing the response would be brief, distracted, or delayed. "Proud of you, maybe?" Then silence again. That was the pattern now. Distance, dressed up as normal. And I adapted, like I always had. I told myself I didn't need more. That I was fine on my own. But deep down, something heavier kept building, layer by layer. Not loud. Not explosive. Just pressure. Waiting. And for the first time, I could feel it clearly. This wasn't strength anymore. It was restraint. And it wasn't going to hold forever. And when that pressure finally had nowhere else to go, it pushed me forward into something I wasn't ready for, but couldn't avoid. The first few months on my own didn't feel like freedom. They felt like impact. Everything hit at once. Rent due. Shifts to cover. Classes to pass. No pause, no safety net. Just constant motion. I remember standing in a small, dim apartment, staring at a bill I didn't know how to pay yet. "Figure it out," I whispered, half command, half plea. So I did what I had always done. I worked. Early mornings, late nights, double shifts when I could get them. My body adjusted before my mind had time to complain. Coffee replaced sleep. Silence replaced conversation. There was no one to fall back on, which meant I couldn't afford to fall at all. Still, there were moments that cut through the routine. Watching other students call home for help, laughing about things I didn't have time to think about. My parents just sent me money, one girl said casually, like it was normal. I nodded, pretending it was. Inside, something tightened again. Not envy. Not exactly. Just awareness. A gap I couldn't close. But instead of breaking me, it sharpened something. Every problem became a task. Every setback, a calculation. I stopped asking if it was fair. That question didn't pay bills. What mattered was control, progress, survival. And slowly, without realizing it at first, I crossed a line. I wasn't just getting through it anymore. I was building something. Alone. From nothing. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like power. And just as I started to build something solid, I couldn't ignore the contrast anymore, because Amanda's life was moving in a completely different direction. While I was counting hours and expenses, she was counting experiences. Trips, parties, new connections. Her social media told the story clearly. Sunlit beaches. Rooftop dinners. Smiles that looked effortless. Best decision ever, she captioned one post about her school. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Not because I wanted her life, but because I understood what made it possible. Support. Freedom from consequences. A safety net that caught her before she ever had to fall. Meanwhile, my reality looked nothing like that. I measured time in shifts, not vacations. My wins were quiet, often unnoticed even by me. Still, the gap between us kept widening, and it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about pressure. She moved without hesitation. I calculated every step. She explored. I endured. One night, after a long shift, I saw another post. Amanda laughing, surrounded by friends, a caption underneath, "Living my dream." I stood there in my uniform, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. "Must be nice," I muttered under my breath. But even as I said it, something inside me resisted the bitterness. Because deep down, I knew the truth was more complicated. She wasn't stronger. She was sheltered. And I wasn't behind. I was being forged. That realization didn't make things easier, but it changed how I carried them. Because for the first time, I could see where both paths were leading. And they were not the same. And once I saw where my path could lead, I stopped treating survival as the goal and started treating it as the foundation. That shift changed everything. I wasn't just working to get by anymore. I was working with intention. Every class I chose, every extra shift I took, every skill I picked up had a purpose behind it. Finance became my focus, not by accident, but because I wanted control over the very thing that had once limited me. Understand the system, and you won't be trapped by it, I told myself, repeating it like a rule I couldn't afford to forget. At first, it was overwhelming. Numbers, concepts, long nights that blurred into early mornings. But unlike before, this pressure felt different. It was mine. I wasn't reacting anymore, I was building. Slowly, results began to show. Better grades. Better opportunities. A small internship that turned into something more. "You're reliable," my supervisor said once, handing me responsibilities others weren't trusted with. Reliable. The same trait that once made me invisible was now opening doors. That realization hit harder than any setback. The thing they overlooked was the thing that set me apart. And I leaned into it fully. I studied harder, worked smarter, said yes when it mattered and no when it didn't. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking to fit a space. I was expanding beyond it. And somewhere along the way, without anyone announcing it, my life stopped revolving around what I didn't have and started being defined by what I was becoming. And just as my life began to stabilize, there started to unravel quietly at first, almost easy to miss. It began with small shifts. Fewer updates. Shorter calls. My mom's voice losing its usual certainty. "Your dad's just dealing with some things," she said one evening, brushing past the details too quickly. I didn't push. Not yet. But something in her tone didn't sit right. Weeks passed, and the gaps grew harder to ignore. Then one night, my phone rang later than usual. My dad. That alone was enough to make me pause. "Hey," he said, his voice lower than I remembered. There was no small talk. No control in his tone. I made a decision, and it didn't go the way I expected. I stayed quiet, letting him continue. An investment. A large one. Something he believed would secure the future. But the numbers didn't hold. The market shifted. The risk he thought he understood slipped out of his hands. I could hear it now, not just in his words, but in the silence between them. "It'll recover," he added quickly, almost convincing himself. But I already knew that pattern. Minimizing. Delaying reality. Still, This wasn't like before. The scale was different. The consequences were real. I asked one question, steady, controlled. How bad is it? There was a pause. Longer this time. Then finally, worse than we planned for. That was it. No numbers. No details. Just enough truth to break the illusion. And in that moment, something inside me sharpened instantly. Because for the first time, their decisions weren't just affecting their future. They were collapsing it. And once that illusion cracked, the details came faster than they could control. What started as a bad investment quickly revealed something far more serious. Missed payments. Mounting interest. Deadlines that had already passed. My mom's voice changed completely the next time we spoke. No more soft explanations. Just quiet panic trying to stay contained. They've been calling every day, she admitted, barely above a whisper. I could picture it, letters stacking on the table, unopened at first, then opened too late. Numbers circled in red. Final notices. I asked the question they were avoiding. Is the house at risk? Silence answered before she did. Then, finally, we're trying to fix it. Trying. Not solving. Not handling. Just trying. That word told me everything. I pressed further, sharper now. How long do you have? Papers shuffled on her end. A breath caught halfway. Weeks, maybe less. The room around me felt smaller instantly. Because this wasn't just financial pressure anymore. This was collapse in motion. The house wasn't just property. It was everything they had built their identity around. Stability. Security. The proof that their choices had worked. And now it was slipping away piece by piece. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing myself to stay calm. Anger flickered, but it wasn't wild. It was focused. Because the truth was undeniable now. Every decision they made, every risk they justified, had led here. And for the first time, there was no one left to absorb the consequences. No buffer. No protection. Just reality, closing in fast, with a deadline that didn't care who they believed in anymore. And just when I thought I understood how bad it was, the call came, the one that changed everything. It wasn't from my parents. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. Something made me answer. Is this Scarlett? The voice asked, formal, detached. Yes, who is this? A brief pause, then, we're calling regarding your parents' mortgage account. My grip tightened instantly. They didn't call Amanda. They called me. We haven't been able to reach the primary contacts, he continued, each word precise, practiced. At this stage, we are required to notify the listed emergency contact. Emergency. Contact. The words landed heavier than anything I'd heard so far. I forced my voice steady. What exactly are you saying? Papers shuffled faintly on his end. Then, without hesitation, foreclosure proceedings have begun. For a second, everything went silent. Not outside. Inside. Like something snapped clean in two. I leaned against the wall, staring at nothing. There must be some kind of mistake, I said, but even as I spoke, I knew there wasn't. At this point, resolution options are limited, he replied. Limited. That word burned. Because suddenly, all the control I had built in my own life didn't apply here. This wasn't my system. This was theirs collapsing. And yet, somehow, I was the one being pulled into it. Not Amanda. Not the one they trusted. Me. And after that call, staying where I was no longer made sense. Not because I felt obligated, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. The next morning, I packed a small bag, moved through my routine on autopilot, and booked the earliest ride back. The entire trip felt unreal, like I was stepping into a version of my past I had already outgrown. But this time, I wasn't returning as the same person who left. When I pulled up in front of the house, the first thing I noticed wasn't the building itself, It was the silence. No music. No movement. Even the windows looked different, like something inside had already faded. I stepped out slowly, my eyes catching the stack of unopened envelopes by the door. Red stamps. Urgent notices. Not hidden anymore. Just there. Waiting. I knocked once, then opened the door before anyone answered. My mom looked up first. Her face shifted the moment she saw me. Relief, guilt, something unspoken all at once. "Scarlett, you're here," she said, like she wasn't sure if I should be. My dad stood in the background, quieter than I had ever seen him. No control. No confidence. Just someone trying to hold pieces together that were already slipping. I walked further in, taking it all in without reacting. The tension was thick, but different now. Not sharp, fragile. "Why didn't you tell me everything?" I asked, my voice steady, cutting through the room. No one answered right away. And in that silence, I understood something clearly. They hadn't called me because they wanted to. They called me because there was no one else left to call. And once that realization settled in, the next question came naturally. Where was Amanda? I didn't say it right away, but the absence was loud. Too loud to ignore. No bags by the door. No voice upstairs. No sign of the person they had built everything around. I turned to my mom, watching her carefully. "Where is she?" I asked, simple, direct. She hesitated. That was enough. "She's busy," she said, avoiding my eyes. Busy. The word felt hollow the moment it left her mouth. I didn't respond. I just waited. Seconds stretched. My dad shifted in place, his silence heavier than any answer. "We tried calling," he added finally, voice tight. "She hasn't picked up." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not surprise. Not exactly. Just confirmation. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through contacts I hadn't touched in months. Her name was still there. I pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. No message. No explanation. Just absence. I lowered the phone slowly, the weight of it suddenly heavier than before. "When was the last time you heard from her?" I asked, sharper now. Another pause. "A few days ago," my mom said quietly. A few days. While everything was collapsing. While notices were arriving. While the house was slipping away. She left. Not dramatically. Not with a fight. Just stepped out of the story when it stopped working for her. And in that moment, something inside me snapped into place. Not anger, not yet. Just clarity. The one they chose wasn't here. And the one they overlooked was standing in front of them. And standing there, watching the space she left behind, I realized something deeper was breaking. Not just their finances, but their belief in everything they had built around her. My mom sank into the chair slowly, her hands gripping the edge like she needed something solid to hold on to. "She wouldn't just leave us," she whispered, more to herself than to me. But the silence in the room said otherwise. My dad didn't argue. He didn't defend Amanda the way he always had. That alone felt unfamiliar. "We gave her everything," he said finally, his voice quieter than I had ever heard. Not proud. Not certain. Just empty. I looked at him, really looked this time. The confidence that once filled every decision was gone. Replaced by something fragile. Something unsure. "And you thought that meant she would stay?" I asked, not harsh, just honest. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time, the logic they had trusted didn't hold. The more they gave, the more they believed it guaranteed loyalty. But it never did. It only removed the need for it. That realization settled heavily between us. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just undeniable. My mom shook her head slightly, like she was trying to undo something that had already happened. "We didn't see it," she said. I believed her. They hadn't seen it. Not because it was hidden, but because they never looked in that direction. And now, with everything collapsing around them, the truth stood in the center of the room, impossible to ignore. The daughter they built their future on had walked away from it. And as that truth settled into the room, something inside me began to shift slowly at first, then all at once. I stood there, looking at them, and for a moment, time split in two. One version of me remembered everything. The silence. The sacrifices. The years of being overlooked without explanation. You don't owe them anything, that voice came back, louder now, sharper than before. And it wasn't wrong. Walking away would have been easy to justify. Logical, even. I could already see it, turning around, leaving the house, letting the consequences finally land where they belonged. But another part of me refused to move. Not out of guilt. Not out of obligation. Something else. Something harder to define. I stepped further into the room, my eyes scanning the damage, papers scattered, tension lingering in every corner. "What exactly have you done so far?" I asked, my tone controlled, almost distant. My dad hesitated, then began explaining in fragments, calls made too late, plans that didn't hold, decisions stacked on top of each other without direction. I listened, but inside, the conflict grew sharper. Every instinct I had built over the years told me to protect myself first. That was how I survived. That was how I got here. And yet, standing in front of them now, I felt the weight of a different choice pressing in. Not easier. Not fair. Just possible. I exhaled slowly, my jaw tightening. Because for the first time, the question wasn't about what they deserved. It was about who I would become if I walked away. And once that question settled in, the answer didn't come as a burst of emotion. It came as a decision. Quiet. Steady. Unavoidable. I looked at them again, really looked this time, not as the parents who had overlooked me, but as people who had run out of options. That didn't erase the past. It didn't excuse anything. But it clarified the present. "All right," I said finally, my voice calm, cutting through the tension. Both of them looked up at the same time, surprised by how simple it sounded. "I'll take a look at everything." My mom blinked, like she wasn't sure she heard me correctly. "You don't have to," she started. I stopped her with a small shake of my head. "I know I don't." And that was the difference. I wasn't stepping in because I had to. I was choosing to. I moved toward the table, pulling the papers closer, scanning numbers, dates, notices. My focus shifted instantly. Problems. Structure. Solutions. That was my language now. Still, beneath that clarity, something else burned, controlled, contained, but real. Not anger at them. Not anymore. Something sharper. Because this wasn't just about saving a house. It was about stepping into a role I was never meant to have, and doing it better than anyone expected. I exhaled once, grounding myself. "We don't have much time," I said, already mapping out the next steps. And in that moment, everything changed, not for them, but for me. And once I stepped into that role, there was no room left for hesitation. Everything moved fast, because it had to. I sorted through every document, separating what mattered from what could wait. Deadlines. Interest rates. Legal notices. Each piece told a part of the story they had tried to ignore. "Why didn't you act sooner?" I asked, not accusing, just needing clarity. My dad looked away. "We thought we had time." That answer said everything. Time was the one thing they no longer had. I pulled out my laptop, building a plan as I spoke. We prioritized the immediate threats first, stopped the foreclosure process, buy us space. My mom nodded quickly, holding on to every word like it was a lifeline. Calls followed. Banks. Advisors. Anyone who could slow the damage. Most conversations were short, direct, unforgiving. Your account is already flagged, one voice said. Options are limited. I didn't react. I adjusted. Shifted strategy. Found angles they hadn't considered. This wasn't panic. This was execution. Hours passed without notice. Papers moved across the table, numbers recalculated, decisions made in real time. At one point, my mom whispered, "I didn't know you could do all this." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't hear her, but because the truth didn't need to be said out loud. I had always been capable. They just never needed to see it before. By the end of the night, the situation hadn't disappeared, but it had direction. A path forward. Fragile, but real. And for the first time since I walked in, the chaos began to shift, not into safety, not yet, but into control. And once the chaos had direction, the real pressure began, the part where every decision had to hold under scrutiny. The next morning, I made the call that mattered most. The bank. No delay, no second guessing. "This is Scarlett. I'm calling regarding the foreclosure case," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the weight behind it. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. Formal. Guarded. "You understand the process has already begun," the representative replied. I did. "That's why I called." "I'm not asking you to stop it," I said. "I'm asking for a path to resolve it." Silence again, but different this time. Measured. Listening. I laid everything out. Income projections. Restructuring options. Payment plans they hadn't considered because no one had presented them clearly before. "We need time," I added, direct, controlled. "And I can prove we can stabilize this." The response didn't come easily. Questions followed. Detailed. Relentless. "What guarantees do you have? Why wasn't this addressed earlier?" I answered each one without hesitation. Not defending the past, focusing on the solution. Minutes stretched into something heavier. Then finally, a shift. "We can review a temporary hold," the voice said. Temporary. Not approval. Not safety. But space. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself. It wasn't victory, but it was movement. And movement meant leverage. "Send me the terms," I replied, already preparing for the next step. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. But for the first time, the system that had been closing in had paused. And once the pause was secured, everything shifted into execution. There was no time to celebrate, no space to relax. Every hour mattered now. I reviewed the bank's terms line by line, catching details they expected to be overlooked. "We can work with this," I said, more to myself than anyone else. My dad leaned forward slightly. "You really think so?" I didn't answer right away. I recalculated, adjusted, restructured. Numbers moved. Priorities shifted. Then I looked up. "Yes, but only if we don't miss a single step." That changed the energy in the room instantly. Not hope. Not yet. But direction. We followed the plan exactly. Payments were reorganized. Deadlines met. Every call handled before it could become a problem again. It wasn't easy. It was relentless. There were moments when the pressure spiked again, when one wrong number could have undone everything. But this time I didn't hesitate. I corrected. Adapted. Moved forward. And then, the message came. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just an email. "Your account status has been updated." I opened it slowly, scanning for anything unclear. Then I saw it, foreclosure halted. Temporary, conditional, but real. I exhaled, the tension leaving my body all at once. My mom covered her mouth. My dad sat back, silent. We didn't celebrate. We just sat there, absorbing it. Because this wasn't just a win. It was proof. The situation they lost control of. I had stabilized. And just when the tension finally eased, something else shifted, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The front door opened without warning. No knock. No hesitation. I turned instinctively, already sensing who it was before I saw her. Amanda. She stepped inside like nothing had changed, like the silence in the house wasn't heavy with everything that had just happened. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning the room, landing on the table, the papers, then finally on me. "So, what's going on?" she asked, casual, almost detached. My mom stood up too fast, relief flashing across her face. "You're back," she said, voice breaking slightly. But Amanda didn't move toward her, didn't ask what she missed. Instead, she crossed her arms, waiting, watching. I stayed where I was, not stepping forward, not reacting the way I might have before. "We handled it," I said simply. That made her pause. Just for a second. "Handled what?" she pressed, a slight edge slipping into her tone. I tilted my head slightly, meeting her gaze. "The house. The debt. Everything." Silence followed, thicker this time. Not fragile, sharp. For the first time, she wasn't the center of the moment. She was outside of it. And in that quiet shift, something undeniable settled into place. The story had moved on without her, and she could feel it. And as that shift settled in, the air between us turned colder, sharper, more deliberate. Amanda stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly, no longer pretending not to notice the change. "So you just fixed everything?" she asked, a faint disbelief under her tone, but no gratitude. Not even curiosity. I held her gaze, steady, unreadable. "Yes," I replied. No explanation. No elaboration. That seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. She glanced at our parents, expecting something, validation maybe. But they stayed silent. Watching. For once, not rushing to fill the space for her. "You should have called me," she said suddenly, her voice tightening. I let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh, but without humor. "We did." That landed. Her expression flickered, just for a second. "I was busy," she shot back quickly. "Of course." The same word again. But this time, it didn't hold the same weight. I stepped slightly forward, not aggressive, just present. "Right," I said. "And we were losing the house." Silence followed, thick, unavoidable. No one moved. No one softened it. For the first time, Amanda had no space to redirect, no one stepping in to protect her from the moment. She looked away first. Just a fraction. But it was enough. Because in that small break, everything was said without needing to be repeated. She wasn't the one who held things together. And now, everyone in the room knew it. And as the silence settled after that exchange, something inside my parents finally broke, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that couldn't be undone. My mom sat down slowly, her eyes moving between Amanda and me, as if trying to reconcile two completely different realities at once. "We thought we were doing the right thing," she said, her voice unsteady, almost fragile. No one interrupted her. Not this time. My dad exhaled deeply, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I had never seen from him before. "We kept choosing what felt easier," he admitted, staring at the floor. Easier. The word lingered in the air. Easier to give more to the one who demanded it. Easier to rely on the one who never complained. I didn't respond. I just watched. Because for the first time, they weren't explaining, they were seeing. "We didn't realize what it was costing you," my mom added, her eyes finally meeting mine. There was no defense in them now. No justification. Just something raw. Regret. And it hit differently than I expected. Not satisfying. Not triumphant. Just quiet. Because the truth was, their realization didn't change what had already happened. It didn't give those years back. But it did something else. It shifted the balance. For the first time, they weren't looking past me. They were looking at me and understanding exactly who I had been all along. And after everything that had been said, the shift didn't come as a grand apology. It showed up in smaller, quieter ways. My mom didn't rush to Amanda anymore. Instead, she stayed where she was, her attention lingering on me longer than usual. It was subtle, but unmistakable. My dad spoke next, but this time, his tone had changed. "What do you think we should do next?" he asked. Not Amanda. Me. That alone altered the room. I paused for a second, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wasn't used to being asked. "We follow the plan," I said simply. No hesitation. No second guessing. They both nodded. No debate. No redirection. Just trust, something that had never been offered to me like this before. Amanda stayed quiet, watching, but not leading. For once, she wasn't the center. And no one tried to put her back there. The roles didn't flip overnight, but they shifted enough to be felt. And in that shift, something settled deep inside me, not pride, not victory, but balance. Because for the first time, I wasn't adjusting to fit into their world. They were adjusting to recognize mine. And as that balance settled in, something inside me finally loosened, something I had been holding onto for years without realizing it. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even the need to be understood. It was heavier than that, and then suddenly it wasn't. I stood there, looking at them, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to prove anything. Not my strength. Not my worth. Not my place in this family. "You don't have to keep doing this," my mom said softly, almost careful, like she didn't want to push me away again. I met her eyes, calm, steady. "I know," I replied. And I meant it. That was the difference now. Everything I had done, every late night, every sacrifice, every decision, it was never really about them. It was about who I chose to become despite them. That realization didn't come with a rush of emotion. It came with clarity. Clean, quiet, undeniable. I wasn't carrying the past anymore. I wasn't waiting for it to be fixed. I was stepping out of it. Fully. And in that moment, something shifted again, not in the room, but within me. I didn't need them to see me the way I had always hoped. I already saw myself. And that was enough. And once I stepped out of that weight, the meaning of everything that happened became clearer than it had ever been before. This was never just a story about unfairness or being overlooked. It was about choices, mine and theirs. For years, I thought love was something you earned by giving more, staying quiet, being easy. But standing here now, I understood something different. "You don't become valuable when people finally notice you," I said slowly, more to myself than anyone else. "You were always valuable." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was absorbing. Because the truth didn't need to be loud to be powerful. My parents listened, not interrupting, not correcting. Maybe for the first time, they were hearing instead of assuming. I continued, my voice steady. "What you give to one person doesn't guarantee who they'll become. And what you ignore doesn't disappear, it grows somewhere else." That landed deeper than anything before. Not as blame, but as reality. And in that moment, the story completed itself in a way no one expected. The one who was given everything walked away. The one who was given nothing built everything. Not out of revenge. Not out of anger. But out of choice. And that's the part no one can take from you. Because in the end, it's not about what you were given. It's about what you decide to become when no one is watching. And as the meaning settled, one question refused to stay quiet. It kept pushing forward, demanding an answer that wasn't simple. Because if everything led here, then what matters most isn't the story. It's the choice you would make inside it. Imagine standing where I stood. The silence. The damage. The people who once overlooked you now depending on you completely. Would you step in? Or would you finally walk away? It sounds easy to say you'd leave. It feels justified. They made their choices, you might argue. But when the moment comes, when it's real, when it's right in front of you, does it still feel the same? Or does something shift? That's the part no one talks about. Because strength doesn't always look like leaving. And staying doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes, the hardest decision isn't about fairness, it's about identity. Who are you when no one is watching? Who do you become when the people who hurt you need you the most? I made my choice. Not because they deserved it, but because I refused to let their past define my future. Now I want to hear from you. What would you do? And as that question lingers, there's only one thing left to do: hear your voice in this story. Because stories like this don't end when the video stops, they continue in the choices people believe in. So let's be real for a second. If you were in my place, would you have done the same? Or would you have chosen differently? Don't just scroll past, pause and think about it. I would walk away, some of you might say. Others might feel I'd still help, but never forget. And both answers carry weight. That's what makes this real. Every perspective reveals something deeper about who you are. So go ahead, drop your choice in the comments. Not just yes or no. Tell the truth behind it. What would you feel? What would you fear? What would you regret if you didn't act? Because sometimes, the hardest decisions aren't about them at all, they're about facing yourself. And here's the part that matters most. Someone reading your comment might be going through something similar right now. Your words could be the thing that helps them decide. So don't hold back. Say it clearly. Say it honestly. What would you do?